Hey everybody. So here we go. I'm gonna burn my bridges. I gotta tell you what's the reality about progressives in Congress. So let me be clear: they do not have bad intent. They all mean well. They all want the $15 minimum wage passed. They want Medicare for all passed. They want Green New Deal passed. They want all of that. Okay, they're good people. But tonight they'll meet, and they will very, 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 very likely decide to do nothing about putting $15 minimum wage back into the COVID relief bill. And that means we will lose on $15 minimum wage. But it also means, and this is the most disheartening part, and this is why I'm doing this video and telling you guys, that means we will lose from here on out. You must be able to block a must pass bill if you are to have power. Uh, Honestly, it's just basic politics. It's not that complicated. It's not some brilliant strategy. Why does Joe Manchin get everything he wants? Why is he like now? People are wondering, is he the president? He took out $15 minimum wage almost single handedly from this bill. Why? He said, "I won't vote for the bill if it's in it." That's how you do politics. And people might find that uncomfortable. And if you're a good progressive and a good person, you might say, well, that endangers people a little bit and it delays the bill a little bit, and he shouldn't do that. Okay, yes, but it does lead to power. It does lead to a seat at the negotiating table. If you're not willing to block a bill, you have no power at all. And that is current state of play.
Today, we will be reading about the Billie Duma. So, in 1905, the Tsar was forced to make a concession to the people, and he opened up two assemblies. One was the Assembly of Nobles, which was kind of like the Senate, if the Senate were all creepily related to the Tsar and they're all creepily inbred with each other. And the other is the State Duma, or the House. And he had rigged the election so that nobles again got like 5 times as many. Like, basically, he had a very weird electoral system such that like a peasant vote was worth like 1/100th of a noble vote. And this was also entirely an advisory Duma, as in the Tsar didn't have to listen to them. And then whenever he got upset, he just dissolved them. So it was like a BS Duma, but not unlike our current system. And so one of the problems with Tsarist Russia was that these feudal landlords had hoarded lots and lots of big estates, and they had these peasants working on them, kind of like sharecropping in America back in the day. So obviously the fair thing to do is to get rid of the feudal estates and cut it up and distribute it among the peasants. And that, of course, all these like parties ran on the distributing land, which is called the peasant question, or sometimes the land question. And that's just based on mistranslation, because question and issue are the same word in вопрос in Russian. And so then they had their first election, and the party that won the majority was the Constitutional Democratic Party. I don't know why I keep doing that. And so they were in the coalition with the AOC. I meant Trudeau-Vix. Oopsie daisy. Why am I doing that again? And so now, one of them is, so the Tsar had his equivalent of the State of the Union address, and some reporter asked whether or not the State Duma supported basically redistributing the land, and then they said yes. But then they went to the Tsar, and the Tsar was kind of acting like Republicans do. And then the cadets had this like really mealy-mouthed reply. So So it reminded me exactly of the minimum wage situation. And the funniest thing is here, the czar like makes up a new procedure, not unlike the parliamentarian that is used to kill the idea of giving the peasants land. And so each week we have okay, so our goal is to get as many of you reading Lenin as possible. So each week we're gonna have a new guest, hopefully somebody who's never read Lenin. And today we have Danny Krieger. Have you ever read Lenin?
I have not.
And so can you tell us a little about your background? You do photography and writing?
Yes. For many years I was a journalist, and I've done other types of writing as well. And for photography, my specialty is portraits.
If you live in New York and you want your portrait done, we'll put the link below. Contact him. He does good pictures.
Okay.
So, are you excited? How do you feel?
Oh, well, I mean, having never read Lenin before, doing it for my first time on camera is a new experience for me.
Yeah, it'll be fun because Lenin is hilarious. Like that's the one thing. And then, yeah. So, shall we get started?
Sure.
So, okay. So this piece is called "A Bold Assault and a Timid Defense," and Lenin is basically making fun of okay. So if the cadets are the Democratic Party, think of the Trudovics as AOC, and he sometimes uses autocracy, the government, Nicholas II, like those are all Tsar and his people. Obviously, the Octoberists and the Black Hundreds are the Republicans. If the Republicans had like death squads to kill like 1,000 peasants. So with that, let us begin with a bold assault and a timid defense. That sounds just like the Democratic Party.
Okay, here we go. It has long been known that the reactionaries are bold and that the liberals are cowards. New confirmation of this ancient truth is provided by the cadets' draft of the State Duma's appeal to the people on the question of the land. Unfortunately, the Trudovics' draft is no better than that of the cadets. This time, the Trudovics are quite helplessly trailing behind the liberal bourgeoisie.
Okay, now Lenin is doing two things. He's calling out and explaining to everyone why the cadets, which is like our Democratic Party, like think of Nancy Pelosi, and why the Trudovics reply to the Tsar is just sucks. And he's also sneakily giving, and he's part of, Lenin is part of the Social Democratic Party, but there's like an issue with the Tsar hasn't entirely allowed them to be legal. So there's a legal wing, there's an illegal wing. But so Lenin's like writing in his like newspaper and now in 1905 they have trains so they can go all over Russia to all the 100 million people in the rural areas. So the issue was a lot like what we face today. A lot of people you see Democratic Party members who claim that, oh my God, the people in West Virginia are like, you've seen that. And so that was the same thing. The Mensheviks believed that they should align with the liberal bourgeoisie, which is on our face a ridiculous idea. And Lenin was like, no. We need to go to the peasants, the rural people. They're the ones who are going to be really doing the revolution. It's just that they just haven't had like, he knows that if you're like, if you're basically a slave and you're working like God knows how long and being traded on the stock market or whatever, they're not going to be, it's not as like easy to understand everything that's wrong with capitalism, especially if you haven't had capitalism yet, because they still didn't have agricultural capitalism. Like they didn't have tractors or factory farms. They just had large feudal estates. In fact, people were worth so little that in many places they didn't even have like farm animals like horses and cows, because like they were expecting people to literally be the cattle. So this, okay, so with that, let's continue.
But there are the Social Democrats in the Duma. Will they not come to the rescue? Recall how this question of the State Duma appealing to the people arose. In its reply to the address from the throne.
Hold on, the address from the throne is like the Tsar's State of the Union.
The State Duma expressed itself in favor of the compulsory alienation.
And compulsory, compulsory alienation is literally like taking away land from the rich. So in 1861, apparently the Tsar had this like affordable, accessible plan to, in theory, getting land if you work hard enough. And Lenin was like, fuck, screw that. We're gonna just, so Lenin was like, compulsory, you take away the land from the plantation owners and redistribute it to the peasants. Go ahead.
The compulsory alienation of the private estates for the benefit of the peasantry. The Goremkin cabinet concisely, clearly, and with magnificent firmness and determination answered, impermissible. But the cabinet did not confine itself to this gruff police official refusal. No, the cabinet ministers have learned something from the revolution. The cabinet ministers do not intend to confine their duties to making formal replies to formal questions of the Duma. The reactionaries are not formalists.
Okay, the reactionaries, okay, so if you've noticed something here, you'll notice that the reactionaries are the right-wingers. You remember how like somehow Joe Lieberman can stop Obama from, I don't know, whatever, and Mitch McConnell was able to get like Brett, what's his name, Kavanaugh in by playing dirty. I mean, he's and look at how he was able to obstruct, because the liberals followed the rules and the reactionaries don't. So Lenin's saying reactionaries are not formalists, so they don't follow the rules. They're practical men. Go ahead.
They know that the real power is not the Duma, but the people. They want to carry their propaganda to the people. Without wasting precious time, they forthwith withdrew up an appeal to the people.
That's some procedure they just totally made up. It's like kind of like the parliamentarian.
It was this government communication of June 20th that suggested the idea of the Duma appealing to the people. The government showed the way. The Duma trailed behind the government, and it was incapable of being the first to take a course worthy of a genuine representative assembly of the people. How was the government's communication framed? Like a real fighting manifesto of the reactionary monarchist party. Oh, the reactionaries are not bashful in the least. They know how to write in militant terms. In their communication, they plainly speak the name of the government.
Indeed, that's code for on behalf of the Tsar.
Indeed, why should they stand on ceremony? The liberal professors claim that we are living under a constitutional system and that the Duma is also part of the government. Let the professors chatter. Let them amuse the people with their constitutional antics. We reactionaries are practical men. We know that, in fact, we are the government. We say so plainly. As for the quibbles and formalism of these liberal pedants, we don't care a fig for them. We say plainly and openly, peasants, you don't know what is good for you. Compulsory alienation is no good for you, and we, the government, will not allow it. All the peasant talk about the land is lies and deception. It is the government that takes most care of the peasants. Even now, it is ready to offer them sops. But the peasants have got to understand that they cannot expect improvements to come from sedition and violence. They can be obtained only by peaceful labor. They should have added for the landlords. And as a result of the constant care our autocratic government takes of the peasants.
Hold on. So what does this sound kind of familiar to you? Like, doesn't it sound exactly like the Republicans' like free market speech, or like whatever Bush like what is it? Work hard. You've seen Mitch McConnell or every Republican do this BS.
Personal responsibility.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And
Oh.
so just I just wanted to get your thoughts. Like, does it sound familiar to you? Like a lot?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And now, okay. Such was the gist of the government's communication. It is an actual declaration of war on the revolution.
The people.
It is an actual manifesto of the reactionary autocracy saying to the people, we shall tolerate no nonsense, we shall crush you.
This sounds a lot like Tom Cotton's editorial about the slave insurrection law. Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
And now the cadets and the Trudovics, who this time are in complete captivity to them, have set about answering the government's challenge. The draft replies of the cadets and the Trudovics have been published today. What a miserable, truly pitiful impression these two drafts create. The reactionary Camarilla does not hesitate to break the law and to declare that what is formally only a small part of the government is the real and entire government. The
Hold
cadets
on. So Lenin's gonna use a word called, I think this has to be our insult of the day. It's called sapient gudgeons. It comes from an old Russian or European tale. And I guess Lenin often used sapient gudgeons, like he's put this in other pieces to describe a vacuum of ineptitude, which is not that different. Okay, go ahead.
The cadets and the Trudovics, like Shedrin's sapient gudgeons, take shelter in the reeds of the law. They are hitting us with lawlessness, saying these sniveling peoples, if you please, representatives, but we are defending ourselves with the law. The Duma, acting in accordance with the law, expresses itself in favor of compulsory alienation. According to the law, no proposal of the government can come into force without the consent of the Duma. We, in accordance with the law, have appointed a committee, a big one, 99 members. This committee is drafting a carefully considered and properly framed law.
Hold on. For me, my favorite part is how he explains what the cadets were doing. Like he's like, we have appointed a committee, a big one of 99 members, and we're like slowly, carefully drafting the law as to like not be useful to the peasant. That should be very familiar to all of us. But I just like the way he puts a big one of 99. That's just like liberalism. Okay, go ahead.
Let the people peacefully and quietly await the conclusion of the work of promulgating this law. The Trudovics deleted this utterly indecently abject concluding sentence. Their consciences pricked them, but they inserted instead a statement about organizing local land institutions.
Doesn't that sound like a lot like organizing, like AOC's word salad about organizing? Okay, go ahead.
Treacherously remaining silent about the fact that the Duma, in other words, its cadet majority, avowedly wants these institutions to be landlord and bureaucratic organizations.
That means that they're going to screw over the peasants. Obviously, like, I mean, if you like, what's going to happen if you have like 100 CEOs decide, like, or 400 wolves deciding what to have for dinner? And Lenin that's the problem with the institutions to be landlord and bureaucratic, as in, yeah, the peasants are getting screwed over.
For shame, gentlemen, representatives of the people, it is disgraceful for you to pretend that you do not understand what every Russian mutzik, even in the remotest village, now understands, namely that in Russia today, there is a wide gulf between laws on paper and the facts of life.
That sounds very familiar to us too, because the president, for example, can bomb Syria, and I guess it's not against the Constitution, but somehow the parliamentarian So yeah, we also have a huge gulf between laws on paper and the facts of life. Go
That
ahead.
it is impossible for the transfer of all the land to the peasants and complete freedom for all the people to be achieved by the peaceful means of allegedly constitutional and strictly legal efforts.
Hold on, let's read that part again.
That it is impossible for the transfer of all the land to the peasants and complete freedom for all the people to be achieved by the peaceful means of allegedly constitutional and strictly legal efforts.
Okay, I hope that's clear to everyone. Okay, go ahead.
If you lack the courage to write as firmly as the Camarilla and to utter your revolutionary truth as candidly, in answer to its reactionary truth, you should not have undertaken to reply to the cabinet.
Well, hold on. What I really like about this part is that reactionaries kind of like say half of the truth in like for me, the reactionary truth is that, like, for example, when Trump said, oh, all these countries were shithole countries. Did I use the same example last week, Jana, as the shithole country example?
No, I don't. I mean, I think we were talking about it, but I don't remember you bringing it up last week.
Phew. Okay. So for me, like the reactionary truth part is when Trump, for example, called some country a shithole country. And the liberals were like, no, that's not very polite. Instead of talking about, wait a minute, the US invaded Haiti in 1917, 1915, created a race war, stayed there for another 30 years, and then like massacred a lot of people, like just literally went and looted all the money from the banks and put it in Citibank. And then like that after World War II, like came the IMF, the shock doctrine, the privatization, and then they've been like exploiting Haiti for like over 200 years now. And of course, the earthquake itself was another shock doctrine excuse. And actually, Haiti had to pay reparations to France for all the lost slaves. So instead of talking for the reactionary truth that yes, Haiti's in a different condition than the US, they actually went to like politeness as opposed to telling the revolutionary truth, which is imperialism screwed that country over. And that this is the same phenomenon that keeps happening and this is why liberalism fails, because exactly reactionary truth to politeness, but what you need is a revolutionary truth to fight the reactionary truth. Do you have it? What do you think of this?
Well, like you're saying, there's a kind of parallel in today's political universe, and I guess it's just something universal that transcends time
and space. Go ahead.
The laws governing the Duma do not provide for an appeal to the people. That being so, O wise men of the law, keep up your interpolations and do not meddle in a field where you have neither the courage nor the straightforwardness nor the ability to compete with the reactionaries.
Wait, can we go over this part again? Just repeat this for people to understand what liberals are not capable of from the laws governing.
The laws governing the Duma do not provide for an appeal to the people. That being so, O wise men of the law, keep up your interpolations and do not meddle in a field where you have neither the courage nor the straightforwardness, nor the ability to compete with the reactionaries, who are practical men and know how to fight.
Well, one thing, this part is very true because we can see this over and over. Like, the liberals capitulate even the 1600 to. It's like, do you know what the check thingy is now? Is it from 2000? What did it go down to? Okay, so Joe Biden said something about $2,000 checks for Georgia, and then now it's at 1,400. And so they keep surrendering. Like, oh, if you've noticed, Trump fought harder for a losing election, and Al Gore surrendered even though he clearly won Florida. Like, there's no doubt about it. So yeah, the liberals are cowards and they're not capable of fighting with reactionaries on any cool footing. Go ahead.
And if you do draw up an appeal to the people, you must write the truth, the whole truth, the bitter and unvarnished truth. You must say to the people, peasants, The cabinet has issued its appeal to you. The cabinet ministers do not want to give you either land or freedom. The cabinet ministers brazenly speak in the name of the whole government. They speak against the Duma, although on paper, the Duma is supposed to be part of the government. Peasants, the cabinet ministers are in actual fact the autocratic government of Russia. They don't care a fig for your people's representatives in the Duma. They jeer at them and delay everything by their police lawyer equivalent. They mock at the demands of the people, and as if nothing had happened, continue their policy of murder, violence, plunder, and pogroms. Peasants, you must know that the Duma is powerless to give you land and freedom.
Yep.
The Duma is tied hand and foot by the laws of the police government. You must secure that the representatives of the people have full power, all the power of the state in their hands.
That means
Do you
get rid of
want
the
land
czar.
and freedom? If you do, then secure the convocation of a national constituent assembly. Secure the complete abolition of the old regime all over the country. Secure complete freedom of elections. Peasants, know that you will never be free unless you free yourselves. The workers understood this, and by their struggles, compelled the government to yield the concessions of October 17th.
That's the
And
Duma.
And you too must understand it. Only when you do so will you be a revolutionary people. That is, a people that knows what it must fight for, a people that knows how to fight, a people that knows how to vanquish its oppressors. Utilize your deputies in the Duma, those who represent you in the Duma. Unite more closely and solidly all over Russia and prepare for a great struggle. Without a fight, you will get neither land nor freedom. Without a fight, you will have ruinous redemption payments forcibly foisted upon you, and will have foisted upon you land committees consisting of landlords and bureaucrats who will deceive and rob you as they did in 1861. Peasants, we are doing all we can for you in the Duma, but you must complete the job yourselves if you really want conditions in Russia to be different from what they are now, even though there is a Duma.
Exactly. So I want people to read this, but let's change peasants to American workers and read this year, and Duma to the legislation, and read this over and over. Change pogroms to imperialism, or actually we might even have pogroms for all we know. And read this whole, I want everyone to read this part over and over to understand what to do. Okay, go ahead.
But it would be ridiculous to propose such an appeal in the Duma. But would it? Is it not more ridiculous to write appeals to the people in the stilted language of the hidebound Russian lawyers that the cadets, and to their shame be it said, the Trudoviks use? Do the people exist for the Duma, or does the Duma exist for the people? Is freedom to exist for the Duma, or is the Duma to serve the cause of freedom?
Second.
Let the cadets appeal and Trudoviks appeal, and our appeal be read at any peasant meeting. We will hear what the peasants say in the answer to the question, who is right?
Well, and as we know, the peasants said, all power to the Soviets. And so they decided that Lenin was right. So for me, what I really like about this piece is that it lays down the limitations of bourgeoisie parliamentarism, or like basically when you have like a capitalist system with like basically our system, more or less, if the Senate were made with a lot of inbred creepy people. So like, how do you feel? Do you feel like after reading this?
How do I feel?
Mhm.
Well, like you said, it just seems like there's this sort of finite political universe in which things occur, and there are trends that repeat themselves historically. Even something, this was composed 115 years ago, and then you can aptly apply it to what's happening today.
I know, it gets creepier. Like the more you read it, there's one piece where I literally had to change the name from Count Hayden to John McCain, and everything applied. So this piece is really funny. It was written in 1921. It's after the revolution, because the Magic Tape is October, depending on the Gregorian or the Julian calendar and the Russian calendar, like it's either November 7th or October 25th, 1917. Anyways, when they got rid of these like reactionaries like Mitch McConnell or whatever, these reactionary, okay, so what a lot of Americans don't realize is that for example, when Ben Shapiro talks about, oh my God, there's reverse racism, and we're like so oppressed now, the white man, like, you know that not to take them seriously, right? Yeah. So the only difference is that in Russia, all the slave owners used to be like are inbred with each other. And in America, it was done by race. And so these slave owners, when they lose power, they'll do the same exact thing where they're like crying, oh my God, Stalin took away my slaves. I'm so oppressed. I don't have any more slaves. Oh, my property was all confiscated. And they'll cry and cry. And unfortunately, a lot of Americans don't have the framework to analyze the Stalin took away my slaves, or Castro took away my slaves versus actual oppression. And when you when you read this piece, you'll understand how to analyze it. For example, that's why like I was able to read the rebels accounts from the Hungarian Revolution and realize that their main complaint was Stalin took away my slaves. And so many like liberals like totally took their idea of oppression seriously, because what Lenin teaches you is what somebody's not saying and what that implies. Like today, Cenk said, what did he say? Burning my bridges. And then he went on to say that the Congress is going to be useless. But when he said burning my bridges, it meant that he was censoring himself for the past God knows how long on purpose in order to maintain access to AOC and whatever, every congressional person so he was kind of doing access journalism. And so whenever you hear a story, you'll always have to, it's often just underneath the surface where you can see what's not being said and what is implied. And through that, it doesn't mean you can reach conclusions immediately, but once you understand that whenever somebody says something, you need to also look at what they're not saying, it'll at least lead you to a path of investigation where you can go find the truth. And that's how I can often figure out if something's a color revolution before everyone else. Because I can always like, it's the same patterns over and over. So and the really cool thing about this is if you check Wikipedia today, Arkady Averchenko is called a satirist, and it's all because of Lenin. So that's like major historical trolling, in my opinion. So let's start. It's called A Capably Written Book.
Capably written little book.
Oh, sorry, Capably Written Little Book.
Okay, here we go. A dozen knives in the back of the revolution, Paris, 1921. This small volume of stories was written by the White Guard.
Hold on. White Guard is like the KKK. I mean, the White Army, White Guard, like, I mean, I guess you don't need more than White Guard. But
White Guard is pretty self-explanatory, I think.
Okay.
This small volume of stories was written by the White Guard, Arkady Averchenko, whose rage rises to the pitch of frenzy. It is interesting to note how this burning hatred brings out the remarkably strong and also the remarkably weak points of this extremely capably written book. When the author takes for his stories subjects he is unfamiliar with, they are inartistic. An example is the story showing the home life of Lenin and Trotsky. There is much malice, but little truth in it, my dear citizen Averchenko. I assure you that Lenin and Trotsky have many faults in all respects, including their home life. But to describe them skillfully, one must know what they are. This you do not know. But most of the stories in the book deal with subjects Arkady Averchenko is very familiar with, has experienced, given thought to, and felt. He depicts with amazing skill the impressions and moods of the representative of the old, rich, gorging and guzzling Russia of the landowners and capitalists. That is exactly what the revolution must look like to the representatives of the ruling classes. Averchenko's burning hatred makes some, in fact most, of his stories amazingly vivid. There are some really magnificent stories, as for example, Grass Trampled by Jackboots, which deals
Hold on.
with
Grass. Okay, so and just so we know, Janet, can you put up the picture of the Volga boat haulers uphill or here, just so people understand how grass trampling jackboots is actually not like oppression compared to having to haul a boat up the river, the Volga, like cattle. But go on.
Okay. Grass Trampled by Jackboots, which deals with the psychology of children who have lived and are living through the Civil War.
Psychology of rich children.
But the author shows real depth of feeling only when he talks about food, when he relates how the rich people fed in old Russia, how they had snacks in Petrograd. No, not in Petrograd, in St. Petersburg.
Hold on. This is kind of cool because Lenin is, as we know, 1/4, I guess his grandfather is Mongolian, but he always sees himself as like part of like as an Asian. He'd never he's the first to use European as an insult. So does people who wanted to I don't know, like this in colonized countries, this is often it. Like the bootlickers, they'll use words like St. Petersburg, but Petrograd is like a Russian Asian, I guess, in back then. So Lenin immediately changed St. Petersburg to Petrograd because he wanted to reclaim the Russianness, or I guess the Asian cult. He wanted to show that Asians were equal to Europeans. And so that's why he makes it clear that he wrote about Petrograd. Oops, not Petrograd, but St. Petersburg, to show that Arkady Averchenko is an asswipe, basically.
But historically, Petrograd kind of lost all currency.
Yeah. Then it became Leningrad after he died.
Okay. So how they had snacks in Petrograd costing 14.5 rubles, 50 rubles, etc. He describes all this in really voluptuous terms. These things he knows well. These things he has experienced. Here he makes no mistakes. His knowledge of the subject and his sincerity are most extraordinary. In his last story, Fragments of the Shattered, he describes an ex-senator in the Crimea, in Sevastopol, which was rich, generous, and well-connected.
Who was rich?
Yes, who was rich, generous, and well-connected, but who is now a day laborer at the artillery dumps, unloading and sorting shells, and an ex-director of a vast steel plant, which was considered to be the largest works in Vyborg district. Now he is a salesman at a shop which sells secondhand goods on commission, and has lately even acquired a certain amount of experience in fixing the price of ladies' secondhand robes and plush teddy bears that people bring to be sold on commission. The two old fogies recall the old days, the St. Petersburg sunsets, the streets, the theaters, and of course, the meals at the Medved Vienna, Mali Yaroslavets, and similar restaurants. And they interrupt their reminiscences to exclaim, "What have we done to deserve this? How did we get in anyone's way? Who did we interfere with? Why did they treat Russia so?" Arkady Averchenko is not the one to understand why. The workers and peasants, however, seem to understand quite easily and need no explanation. In my opinion, some of these stories are worth reprinting. Talent should be encouraged.
Yeah. So, and then he ends up printing it in the fiction and satire section of the magazine. And that's why Arkady Avrachenko is known as a satirist today. But what I really like is you can actually, you can see this. There was some lady, Janice Vakadaza, who was like, "Oh my God, our country, it's suffering," kind of like from Bolivia. And then you asked her what was going on, and she can't really be clear. So what you'll notice is a lot of these pro-democracy activists usually can't tell you anything other than, "Oh my God, he's a brutal dictator that suppresses free speech." And usually, or suppresses my favorite is suppresses dissent. And then you're like, "What are you dissenting on?" And they're like, "Well, I want to kill all commit genocide." And the brutal dictator said, "No, no more genocide." So in America, they'll like teach you guys like, "Oh my God, it's bad to crush dissent." But imagine if Fred Hampton was the president, the dissent would be the KKK, and you need to crush them. So this will kind of gives you like all the little things to look for in whether or not somebody is a gusano or telling the truth about actual oppression. So how did you like this piece?
Yeah, well, I found it amusing the way he talks about the book, and the titles of the stories sound so absurd and silly and over the top, like Fragments of the Shattered and Grass Trampled by Jackboots. That's kind of funny.
That's a lot like Ben Shapiro, in my opinion, when he's like, "Oh my God, cancel culture." Like it's like a lot of right wingers do. Rush Limbaugh does that too, right? Did that.
It sounds like a parody. It's sincere, but it sounds like if somebody wanted to write a comedic parody, that they would have such titles.
Yeah, and basically Lenin did him a big favor by classifying it as parody. So that so yeah, I like that too. And for me, like I always use this one. I always used to look at, for example, when people are like, "Oh, he's a brutal dictator who oppresses his own people," I'll always ask, "What did he do?" And if it's like, "Oh my God, there are too many Black people around me," which a lot of I mean, they won't say exactly that, but they'll use other dog whistles, like Fidel Castro outlawed Catholic schools, i.e., made too many integrated schools. Basically, there were like a lot of like in Cuba, it was very racialized, and the majority of the people that came were of the top racial echelon. So you'll see that it's a lot of these like oppressions, especially if you hear it in American media. It's like, have you ever seen the egg monopoly tweet?
No.
Let me show it to you. It's so hilarious. Janet, do you remember the egg monopoly?
I don't remember it either.
You guys, neither of you remember the egg monopoly tweet. Okay. So this girl was talking about how Mao oppressed her. She had to delete her Twitter after that. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, you guys see this now? My great I'm sorry. My great grandfather had a monopoly of eggs in all of China. And my grandmother was super rich, living in a mansion when the Cultural Revolution happened and took everything away.
And that's not a joke.
No, she had to delete.
So basically, she's complaining that the monopoly was destroyed.
Of eggs.
Like how unfair.
I know. And then another tweet later was about how her grandmother had to smuggle all these jewels up. Like it was like absurd. Yeah. So unfortunately, like, yeah, this is like the main difference is being able to tell when somebody's being a Ben Shapiro versus really being oppressed. So do you have any thoughts about how you feel now? Do you feel like you understand things better? Do you feel like your expectations are different? Like, what do you feel now after reading?
Well, I mean, I still think it's like reading Shakespeare, where you need some annotations to really appreciate the references, for example. And I mean, even though, as I said, some of the concepts ring true in 2021, the references are pretty dated, and you need to have some sort of key to help guide you through them.
Yep. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because we just created a review newsletter, which we'll put the URL down. So from now on, every week before we air our show, we will do like an annotation of what Lenin annotation, but like, as long as, but of course there's like 3 obvious things. He hates Karl Kautsky, which is about half his work. He's the head of the German Social Democratic Party. And like literally half of Lenin's work is about how much Kautsky sucks. I'm not kidding. And then the second one is Plekhanov, who's a Menshevik. But yeah, you're right. We should put a little cast of characters maybe before the piece, and who they are, what they look like, and what else? Something like that. So, and that's actually a very good suggestion. So just click on the link below to sign up for it. That way, every week, right before Sundays with Lenin, you'll get our annotated version of Lenin.
And another thought I had is in another attempt to kind of apply Leninist thinking to the moment, it would be interesting, if it hasn't already been done, for someone to create like a Twitter feed of Lenin commenting on current events and applying all of his ideas to the moment, as him in his voice saying what he thinks about everything that's happening right now. I could easily imagine him talking about the stimulus bill, for example, and whatever's happening at the moment. So just an idea to kind of make it relevant to the moment.
We've been thinking about that, and I'm so glad, like, you're like almost read our mind. We promise, actually, like we didn't coordinate this. Like, this is follow Lenin_tweets. And we will try to do our best to have copy and paste what Lenin would have said about these people. And that's a great idea, because Lenin would have like been shit posting, and I bet you he would have like been getting into arguments with Neera Tanden. The one question though is, would Lenin have a blue check or not a blue check? What do you think?
I think that it would be something that would just be left up to the fates of Twitter.
Okay. I personally think that Lenin would. Jenna, do you think Lenin would have a blue check?
I think that they may not give him one, but we'd all fight for him to have one, because he is a politician and and well known. But you know, I know how Twitter goes. So
yeah, I bet you he'd have the most followers, like 10 million, 100 million, whatever the most is. Anyways, thanks again for coming to Sundays with Lenin. And if you guys have somebody, I don't care, like if you have an uncle who's kind of weird and awkward and right-wing, anyone, just nominate, and you want them to come here and just read Lenin so that they can kind of get on the right track, or maybe get on the correct track, or just kind of understand things better. Or maybe you can have community, like, for me, this one actually, right before we go, let me share this one. This one is hilarious. So yesterday I was this Bloomberg person critiqued allegedly, talking about Berlin's rent control law, which is the same exact argument that they've done for at least over 150 years, because Frederick Engels has also wrote something about the rent control law. And what I thought was hilarious was this part. He wrote in a food shortage, for example, regulating the price of bread only trades one expression of scarcity, high prices, which is like people not being able to afford bread, starvation, for another, empty shelves, people eating bread. So he literally like did a drill tweet, and like there's like no difference between starving and people eating too much food, which is like come on, that's just ridiculous. And I mean, because of Lenin, I know, like, because I've read Lenin and I've seen his method of how he goes line by line, I know how to like fight back, and I'm confident that I'm going to be right. Like, I've never been it allows me the confidence to know that I'm right, and that's what I really appreciate the most. And so thank you. And if you are living in New York and you want a picture done, go to Danny. And I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, like, and hit the bell. And let us know what you think. Would Lenin have a blue check? And share this with as many people as you want. And have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks again.